Let's take a look at solving quadratic and cubic equations by inspection. This is lesson 3 from unit 11. When will you teach this lesson? Let's take a look at the big picture to find out. As you can see here, this is a Math 7 accelerated lesson. It's taught in unit 11 during the fourth 9 weeks, and it's lesson 3. Now, one thing I'd like to mention at this point is that there are several opportunities for students to learn about properties of exponents and also perfect squares and perfect cubes. And they will need all that information to help them with this lesson. So just keep in mind as we look at the problems that they will have this background knowledge prior to starting this lesson. So if I want to look at the standards, the helpful teacher tips and presentation strategies, I can find all that and more in the scope and sequence. Once again, I already mentioned that this is a Math 7 accelerated standard, standard number 15, where they're going to use square root and cube root symbols to represent solutions to equations. They're going to evaluate square roots of perfect squares, less than or equal to 225, and cube roots, less than or equal to 1,000. So, as far as teacher tips go, now that students understand what perfect squares and perfect cubes are, and I showed y'all that on the scope and sequence, they will apply that knowledge for these equations that are x squared equals p or x cubed equals p, and they'll take either the square root or the cube root in order to solve those. So this lesson has several presentation strategies and instructions for how to go about doing the lesson. But for this video, I'm going to focus on one of my favorite parts of this lesson, and it's where the lesson starts. And what they're given, the students are given 2 tables, and their instructions are to find the rule. So they're going to compare the left column and the right column all the way down through to see if they can figure out what the rule is. Now, based on this 3 and the 9, because 1 and 1s can be many things, but this 3 and 9, a lot of students are going to assume that either we're adding 6 or we're squaring the number. But once we get down here to this 11 and 121, we're going to know that we're squaring these. Now, what I would like for you to do as you walk around and you're talking with your students is not only have them write the rule for going from left to right, but also what do they do when they have the number on the right but not the left? So really there's 2 rules that can be written for each table. So this is going to be their perfect square table, and this is the perfect cube table. So just really encourage them, like I said, to go back and forth between the left and right and not just see these tables one way. The last thing I want to talk about is using that vocabulary when it comes to taking the square root of a number. I usually tend to use the statement, what number times itself will equal 64? So I really want them to focus on what number times itself, because that's what squaring a number is. And very similarly, what number times itself 3 times? So what number times itself times itself times itself will equal 64? And this is the one I wanted to kind of give you a heads up about. You see that negative exponent, but once again, in the first 3 days of this unit, when the kiddos are learning about properties of exponents, this negative exponent will be addressed. So I think for these, I would probably guide my students to doing something like this instead. So x squared equals 1 over 256 and solving it from this form.